critically acclaimed with an unbridled amount of hype backing it, the name Hunter x Hunter alone is a title that carries a reputable and notorious reception. Some claim it to be the best and darkest written shonen of all time, others would argue that the show has incredibly bad pacing, and overly pretentious shonen that attempts to deconstruct tropes of the modern shonen genre. The claims of it being the best and darkest shonen was an unusual pair to see when listening to others' review of the series. While the statement of Hunter x Hunter being the best alone was a big obstacle to surpass, but being the darkest too was something that I'll admit was the driving force behind my interest. However, little did I know that what awaited me was a narrative waiting to tear my heart out to pieces as this young boy goes off on an adventure that would change both of our lives forever. One of the most common criticisms I see about Hunter x Hunter is how slow the pacing is to get to the good parts of the story, like the York New or Chimera Ant arc. But honestly, I think each arc is as important as the next, as each arc builds upon each other in a very unique way that adds more to the narrative of Hunter x Hunter. The Hunter exam arc is probably one of the most underappreciated and overlooked arcs, as most perceive this part of the story as merely an arc that introduces characters and what it takes to be a hunter. While the initial impression is true, this is only half of what the arc does for its narrative.
わかんない。でも知りたいんだ。親父が夢中になったハンターって仕事を俺もやってみたいんだ。
From this point and onwards, Hunter x Hunter provides us two separate types of narrative. An overarching narrative, a narrative that is explicit and clear, and an underlying narrative that is obscured by the surface. The overarching narrative, Gon finding his father, is the driving force that pushes the narrative along. It motivates our main character in further exploring the world his father is a part of, which eventually leads him to find new friends and foes alike along his journey. While the underlying narrative, the reasons that Jing became a hunter, plays off the overarching narrative that opens up the world of Hunter x Hunter behind the scenes, albeit it colors the world in moral ambiguity, which is a very critical motif that lays the foundation for one of the strongest arcs and the overall theme of Hunter x Hunter. The Hunter exam begins, an exam that pushes our characters to their utmost limits with their lives on the line. Each examinee must utilize all of their abilities to pass each exam, a dauntless task in which only a few succeed. The Hunter exam arc immediately portrays the danger that resides with being a hunter, as we see people being devoured by animals and the viciousness of nature. Other examinees fight to the death with other participating examinees, and each passing exam being as arduous and deadly as the previous. And it's no wonder, as the Hunter exam is usually described as the hardest test due to its cruel and relentless structure. But as most exams go, everything that constitutes what each examinee will go through is what each person will inevitably have to face in their daily lives as professional hunters. The exam familiarizes us with the dangers of the world and what we can expect from the story moving forward, as our young main character faces these trials and tribulations head-on, utilizing both abilities and environment to their advantage. The Hunter exam arc is the arc where the underlying narrative is at its most strongest, as we watch our main character follow the footsteps his father once took. The first exam used to exhibit the extreme endurance and acute sense of wit to be able to discern reality when faced with deception under extreme circumstances. The second exam sheds light on the diverse types of hunters there are in the world. The third exam doing nothing at all. The fourth exam manifests the traditional practice of being a hunter, and the final exam, pitting the strongest of the applicants against each other, as moving forward, hunters will inevitably fight other strong hunters. The overarching narrative here is for Gon and the gang to pass the hunter exam, as this will bring Gon one step closer to finding his father, while for others is simply a means to an end. While the underlying narrative represents how vastly ambiguous morality is in this world, as we witness multiple times, that our cast and side characters hold no qualms with the loss of lives around them, never batting an eye, as this is simply the way of the world for hunters, illustrating the Darwinistic theory of survival of the fittest, or natural selection. Darwin states, "This preservation, during the battle for life, of varieties which possess any advantage in structure, constitution, or instinct, I have called natural selection." Accumulatively, the Hunter exam arc is meant to prepare both our characters and the audience of the treacherous dangers that is to be expected in this world, most of which is still vastly unknown, as Gon and the gang plunge headfirst into its perilous uncertainty. While writing this video, I realized that it wouldn't have been complete without briefly discussing the character of Killua Zoldyck, and honestly, I feel a video dedicated to discussing his character is well deserved, but discussing the implications of Hunter x Hunter's world wouldn't be complete without discussing its challenger. Killua Zoldyck, a product of a hostile environment, struggles to break free from a world where his latent abilities pragmatically coincide with the contentious world of Hunter x Hunter. Embodying the notoriety of the Zoldyck family name, Killua is a born and bred assassin, raised on torture and pestilence to become the beneficiary of his family. The Hunter exam dubiously introduces us to Killua as a childlike yet standoffish character, constantly challenging Gon to superfluous but ultimately youthful challenges, asking to share belongings due to youthful marvel, and just all around playful, at least towards Gon. But with each passing episode, more and more we come to witness the parts of him that are so cold and detached from what a child should be. He kills with perfect precision, willingly shows his bloodlust as a means to revel in his misplaced arrogance, and doesn't spare a second thought in ending the lives of those who get in his way. But with this conflicting amount of information, one can help but wonder where the line is drawn that infers which part of him is real. In contrast, Gon is the polar opposite of Killua's character and his developments. He's a bit naive and innocent, steadfast and hard-headed, and cares so little of one's past or upbringings. If we were to look back on how the Hunter exam fleshes out the harsh world of Hunter x Hunter, it makes sense that Killua's skills would arguably harmonize itself with his environment, as his strengths complement against all the world's peril. But in truth, Killua couldn't give a damn.
どうした?本当は望みなんてないんだろ?違う!
ゴンと友達になりたい。人殺しなんてうんざりだ。ゴンと友達になって普通に遊びたい。
Despite his strengths and the path laid out for him, despite being able to live a life where his environment complemented his abilities, Killua wanted none of it. Instead, what others would consider a natural order of human connection, something some would consider arbitrary, means the world to Killua. Bred from an environment of endless torture, void of love and any shred of empathy, Killua is the symbolic representation of an individual struggling against traditions and challenging the natural laws of his world. He wants to be free from his shackles, to live differently. He wants to live a life worth living. And befriending Gon was the first step towards the world he wanted. But in spite of that, as Killua challenges the world fights back against him. crippling his self-esteem by constantly attacking his insecurities that he isn't worthy or capable of realizing his dream. And the worst is that Killua believes in the words of his older brother that someone like him, who walks the path of blood, can never walk side by side with someone so full of light as Gon. His insecurities get the better of him as he discards all hope of ever gaining his utmost desires, as he kills Bodoro and leaves it all behind, accepting that the only path he can walk is that of a cold-blooded killer.
ゴンと友達になりたいだと寝ぼけんなとっくにお前ら立ちどうしたろうがよ
After the completion of the Hunter exam, not a single second is wasted as we move forward towards our next arc. While this arc may be the shortest in the series, it remains equally as important as this arc puts the cast onto their first trial against a cold and unknown world. During the Hunter exam, the Zoldyck family were briefly mentioned by Killua and Illumi, and this arc serves to introduce them and ends with even more questions. Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika passed the Hunter exam, an impressive feat, but celebrations are cut short, as this arc immediately shows us that their journey of growth is far from over, demonstrating that becoming a hunter was merely the starting point, as there are much more tenacious beasts that lie in wait. The Zoldyck family is notoriously known around the world as an elite group of assassins. It matters not the reason, nor the person. Taking one's life is merely business to them and nothing more.
お主、わしらを快楽殺人者と勘違いしとらんか。好きでやっとるわけじゃなし。わしはただ働きもただちにもまっぴらじゃわい。
After witnessing the moral and ethical grayness wrapped around the Hunter Association, it makes sense how a group of people like this can exist in this world. But to Gon, none of that matters. Despite his family's nature and Killua's murderous past, Gon is still willing to accept Killua for who he is, as he stubbornly dives headfirst into this barbaric world to rescue his friend. But Gon would soon learn that his misplaced headstrong optimism would not be enough to succeed in this endeavor against the polar opposite world of Killua's. Until it eventually does. But despite that, the arc succeeds in two objectives: introducing the Zoldicks and setting the stage for the world ahead, where the underlying narrative of Hunter x Hunter is fleshed out even just a little bit. By introducing the Zoldicks, the narrative establishes its power creep, as while our cast has passed what was implied to be an incredibly difficult test, the narrative shows us that it's nothing in comparison to what has yet to be unveiled, preparing Gon and the audience for what is yet to come.
世の中正しいことばかりではありません。お気をつけて、キルア様をよろしくお願いいたします。
鎖ね、なんでだろうな。
地獄に繋いでおかねばならないような連中がこの世で野放しになってるからだろう。
Ask anyone who has watched Hunter x Hunter, and you'll undoubtedly hear that the York New arc is where the narrative takes a sudden turn into deeper, darker, and more complex themes, allowing Hunter x Hunter's combat-centric themes onto the back burner, in turn for Togashi's story crafting and characterizations to become Hunter x Hunter's prime focus.
I believe in gray characters. I don't believe in black and white characters. I don't want to write the band of heroes on one side and the orcs on the other side. But that's not to say that all characters are equally gray. Some are very dark gray, and some are mostly white, but they still have occasional flaws in them.
Kurapika of the Kurta clan, earlier introduced during the Hunter exam, is a character whose primary characterization is the traditional foundation of youth who walk the path of something completely simplistic and easily empathizing as vengeance. Kurapika's straightforward and empathizing ambitions here heavily plays on the political catchphrase of moral clarity. The objective of moral clarity is to define an absolute good and evil, Popularly defined in American politics during the War on Terror, moral clarity is used when a country or an individual's actions are justified by the greater moral necessity. While moral clarity sounds just on paper, it is a term that is shrouded in hypocrisy, drawing the lines thinner and thinner and rationalizing individual and even malicious intervention. In relation to Hunter x Hunter, Kurapika's quest for vengeance due to the massacre of his clan is the moral clarity, as it isn't that difficult to relate to a character whose actions are driven by fury from the injustices of another, the other being the Phantom Troupe. The Phantom Troupe is among the most engaging topics when discussing Hunter x Hunter, due to its diverse, colorful cast of characters, the enigmatic background of Lucilfer, its uses of religious symbolism and citations of biblical passages, Togashi's brilliant craft in the troupe's characterizations, how they interact with each other, and so much more. I could go on for hours talking about the subtle intricacies of the troupe, but seeing as this video is long enough already, I'll be sticking to discussing the troupe as a whole relative to the topic at hand. The Phantom Troupe is important to Hunter x Hunter's narrative, as they are partially paradoxical to the overall theme of Hunter x Hunter, which we'll tackle later on. Moral ambiguity in story writing and characterization isn't as rare to find as one may think. Shakespeare's Hamlet, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, or correspondent to the video's genre, Kishimoto's Naruto, to name a few examples of their implementation of moral ambiguity to their characters and or narratives. But what distinguishes the moral ambiguity in Hunter x Hunter is Togashi succeeding in creating a group perceived to be a bandit of cold-blooded killers, the enemy of the main cast, the villains, to become empathized and relatable. Before I proceed further, I just wish to preface that in no way am I advocating or justifying the actions of unwanted murder, but rather that, in order to rationalize the actions of the troupe, we must first examine their environment. Garbage. Garbage as far as the eye can see. A junkyard of things unwanted that will soon be forgotten. A trash heap where the world dumps its refuse, free of its burden and attachments. Now add in human lives, and what is it that you'll get? What ideals or morals could be born from such a life? Perhaps they were dealt a bad hand, or perhaps it was a cruel twist of fate. Regardless of circumstances, the denizens of Meteor City are on record non-existent, and the city's existence is only known by a select few. Running with an estimated population of 10 million unidentified people who were either outcasted from their origins or was simply born to be thrown away, the inhabitants of Meteor City are often used as hitmen or assassins. They receive a job only to be thrown away once more. Able to relate their griefs of miserable circumstances, the people of Meteor City share a unique bond, looking out and protecting one another as if they were all a part of the same family that can only be described as thinner than water yet thicker than blood. And it's due to these bonds where their message was spawned. We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us. On the surface, this may seem as representation of one man's trash being one man's treasure, but this message means something much more. 10 years prior to the events of Hunter x Hunter, a citizen of Meteor City was arrested and falsely accused of murder, involuntarily forced to fake confession, and condemned to prison. It was later revealed that the actual perpetrator was caught and information of the accusers were brought to light. And the repercussions were 31 Meteor City inhabitants suicide bombing themselves with those who falsely accused their fellow man. One of them leaving behind their message, "We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us." With their strong bonds in mind, fast forward a few years and we're introduced to Lucilfer. Along with 6 other inhabitants of Meteor City, Lucilfer created a group in which he, as well as the other members, considers their family. For reasons not yet known, they leave Meteor City, and 6 more join their group, spawning the Phantom Troupe. Each member has their own individuality, accentuated from their environment of Meteor City, which repressed expression and idiosyncrasies. By forming the Phantom Troupe, they have found their true place in the world that they can proudly call home and be who they want to be, to live. Cultural relativism is the ability to understand another's culture, free of personal biases of their own sets of cultures and morals. It is not yet known why, or if there even is a reason, but the Phantom Troupe is a band of powerful Nen users who operate as a gang of thieves, usually stealing all that catches the leader's eye, whom after admiring it for a while, would eventually sell it for reasons unknown. Given the indoctrinations of their environment, it is clear that outside of their people, they see little value in human lives, which conforms to their actions of taking what they want, even if they have to kill to get them, as it is simply a means to an end. But unfortunately, among those they have killed and stole from, Kurapika, the sole survivor of the Kurta clan, is a victim of their actions. Inexorably compelled by fury, Kurapika embarks on a quest to search and kill the members of the Phantom Troupe. Spoiler alert, he does. While the Phantom Troupe is a family of people in which they consider home, contrast to Kurapika, the cold irony that those who took his home has a home that he seeks to destroy. Ironically, the motto of Meteor City is a duality of Kurapika's vengeance, as they took away from him what matters most, and in turn, the Phantom Troupe will also embark on a journey towards vengeance for their fallen comrade, which begs the question, what is justice and what is truly just here? Referencing a blog from Emily J. Hooks, true justice does not isolate the wrongdoer. Rather, it recognizes the ways in which we are all connected. It also sees through the lens of tolerance that the one who has done harm is also in pain. Only in being brought back into the fold will they be able to truly assume accountability and empathy. Kurapika's actions towards vengeance is entirely predicated on his compassionate nature, while the Phantom Troupe is arguably driven by their relative emptiness from their upbringings. However, due to the loss of a member of their family, they too embark on a quest for vengeance, spawning a vicious cycle of bloodshed. At the end of the York New arc, while Kurapika and Chrollo one-sidedly clash fists, neither meet their vengeance, as both sides prioritize life over desires. Kurapika to Gon and Killua, and the Troupe to Chrollo. And I believe that the overall message that Togashi was expressing here is that actions are influenced by environment. The Phantom Troupe, emerged from the vile upbringings of Meteor City, causes their value of human life to be void of any sentiment. And it's due to their ideals that cause them to shed blood without remorse or regret. But as a domino effect, the compassionate nature of Kurapika spawned a monstrous fury that would eventually lead him to further lose his humanity. And it's due to that fury which dualistically infected the Troupe with the same rage and sadness as Kurapika. Both are a victim enslaved to their environments, both are represented as wrong and venomous, but where do we draw the line? When is enough enough? And how can we help someone so deep in pain?
仲間だからだよ。仲間だから本当はクラピカに人殺しなんてしてほしくない。だから交換で済むならそれが一番いいんだ。
パクはお前らに感謝してたぜ。
俺を覚えているか。上爪の大きさから想像すると多分2メートル以上あるぞ。人間なんてあっという間に食われちまう。
ああ、その通りだ。
思わなかった。弱いことがこんなに悔しいなんて思わなかった。
お前ら豚や牛の命乞いに耳を貸したことがあるか。
凶暴なオーラ、俺は見ただけで 心が折れてしまった。
あんたたちもすごく強い。それでもあいつに勝てる気がしない。
世の力、暴力こそこの世で最も強い力。
進む先、勝っても負けても地獄だぞ。
平気だよ。仲間をゴミっていうような奴らに同情なんかしない。
それが危険なんだ。仲間思いの奴がいたらどうする？
俺じゃできないんだ。メルエもすべてを照らす光という意味です。
退屈と断然、いささかの躊躇の答え。名は何と申す？